Welcome, weary traveler. You've left behind the noise of the world and stepped into a realm untouched by time. Here, candlelight dances upon ancient stone walls, and the air carries the soft hum of forgotten lullabies beyond these gates. The night is gentle, and every story is a silver thread, weaving warmth around your heart. So, rest your mind. Let each word be a quiet step into the halls of dreams, until sleep, tender and deep, finds you. You are safe here, and slowly, the world drifts away. Chapter 1. The lanterns along the lane. The night was soft and slow, dressed in mist and moonlight. It was All Hallows' Eve, yet the air held no fear, only the gentle hush of autumn settling over the hills. The leaves, pale gold and brittle, rustled faintly along the cobblestone lane that led to the old castle. Lanterns hung from crooked posts, their glow warm and drowsy, as though they were half asleep themselves. The castle waited beyond the trees, its towers bathed in silver light, its windows glimmering faintly with reflections of the stars. It did not look haunted, not in the way one might expect. It looked tired, dreamy, as if it had seen too many seasons. Too many gentle ghosts drifting through its corridors, and had decided long ago to welcome them like old friends. The villagers spoke softly of it, calling it Elderglow Keep, for it always seemed to shimmer faintly at dusk. They said it was a place of memory, where whispers of the past lingered, not to frighten, but to remind of love, of longing, of lives once tenderly lived. And so, on that mild Halloween night, a single traveler made his way up the lane. His name was Alaric, a quiet soul who preferred solitude to celebration. He was neither old nor young, simply weary from the noise of the world. His cloak was heavy with dew, and his lantern cast a pool of golden light that moved softly with his steps. He had heard of Elderglow Keep not as a haunted place, but as a resting place, a house that hummed faintly with the lullaby of centuries. It was said that those who slept within its walls dreamt peacefully, as if the castle itself was watching over them. As Alaric walked, the air grew warmer, as though invisible fires flickered within the fog. The faint sound of an owl echoed from the distance, slow and rhythmic, a kind of heartbeat to the night. He reached the gates just as the moon began to climb higher. The iron bars were cool to the touch, carved with curling vines and worn symbols half swallowed by time. They creaked open, not with a shriek, but with a sigh, as if welcoming him home. Inside, the courtyard stretched out in soft shades of silver and gold. Fallen leaves gathered in quiet corners, and a small fountain murmured sleepily beneath the watch of ivy-draped statues. Every stone seemed to breathe faintly, alive with the hush of age. A soft glow beckoned from within the main hall. Alaric followed it slowly, his boots whispering against the stones. The doors were heavy oak, yet they yielded easily. And then he was inside. The hall opened like a dream. Candles lined the long tables, their flames steady, golden, and still. The scent of old wood, beeswax, and faint lavender filled the air. Portraits hung along the walls, faces from centuries past, each serene, each half smiling, as though their spirits were still resting nearby. Somewhere, faint music drifted, not loud, not distinct, just the suggestion of it. A few notes, perhaps carried by memory, echoing from some long ago evening when laughter once filled the hall. Alaric set his lantern upon the nearest table and sat beside it. He did not call out. There was no need. The castle seemed aware of him already. For a long while, he simply sat in silence, watching the way candlelight shimmered upon the goblets and glass. Dust motes turned lazily in the air, catching light like tiny stars. The fire in the great hearth flickered low but steady, its warmth curling gently through the air, and as he breathed, something inside him, something tight and restless, began to loosen. He remembered, faintly, why he had come. Not for adventure, not for stories of spirits, but for rest. He had been a scholar once, lost in parchment and ink, chasing answers to questions that never ended. He had forgotten what quiet felt like, forgotten how to listen to the stillness between thoughts. But here, in this place of candlelight and gentle echoes, he began to feel that stillness again. The fire shifted softly. Somewhere in the hall above, a floorboard creaked not sharply, but with a sleepy groan, like an old friend turning in their slumber. Alaric smiled faintly. The castle was not haunted by ghosts, he thought. It was haunted by peace. He rose and wandered deeper into the hall. His fingertips brushed over a long table where silver goblets stood, slightly tarnished but arranged as though awaiting guests who never left. A few chairs were pulled out, and one candle, just one, burned brighter than the rest. He paused before it. There, beside the candle, lay a small, folded piece of parchment. Its edges were yellowed with age. He opened it gently. The words were faded, written in a flowing, ancient hand. To those who find this hall on All Hallows Eve, fear not the whispers of these walls. They are dreams, not hauntings. Rest, for the night is long and kind. Alaric read it twice, the corners of his mouth softening. He placed the note back and whispered a quiet thank you. The castle seemed to breathe, in response a faint settling sound from the rafters, a shift in the air. He found a chair near the hearth and lowered himself into it. The warmth of the fire seeped into his bones. Shadows danced across the stone walls like slow-moving clouds. The flames hummed a soft rhythm, almost like a lullaby. His eyes grew heavier. The sounds of the night, the whisper of the wind through the high windows, the murmur of embers merged into one long, gentle exhale, and as he drifted between waking and dreaming, he thought he saw movement by the staircase. Not frightening, not sudden, simply the faint shimmer of light, shaped like a woman in old silk, her hair flowing like pale smoke. She did not move toward him. She simply watched, calm and distant, her eyes full of something like memory. Then, as softly as she appeared, she was gone. Alaric did not stir. He only breathed deeper, sinking further into rest. The castle's calm wrapped around him, as though it had been waiting centuries for someone who understood that silence could be holy outside. The mist thickened around the towers. The moon watched from above, serene and silver. The wind sighed through the broken battlements, carrying with it the faint scent of burning wood and fallen leaves. And deep within the heart of the keep, somewhere beneath the stones, faint voices hummed low and kind. Not cries, but harmonies. The echoes of those who had once lived, once loved, once rested here as he did now. The candles burned lower. The fire sighed softly in the hearth, and the castle, ancient and gentle, seemed to smile. Halloween had come not as a night of fright, but as a night of remembering. And in that remembering, the house itself seemed to sleep, for the first time in years. Alaric felt the world slow enough for dreams to return. He let his head rest against the chair, eyes half closed, as the warmth of the fire kissed his thoughts goodnight outside. The mist whispered across the lane, tracing the same soft path that had brought him here, and the lanterns, one by one, dimmed beneath the moon. The night deepened, and the castle kept its promise to guard the dreams of those who sought its quiet heart. Chapter 2. The Ghost in the Garden Courtyard. Morning never truly came to Elderglow Keep, not as it did in other places. When dawn touched the hills beyond the castle, it came wrapped in silver fog, turning every branch and stone into a quiet shape of light and shadow. The sun, shy and muted, barely reached the courtyard before the mist swallowed it again. Alaric awoke to the soft crackle of dying embers. The great hall was hushed, filled with that half-light that lives between night and morning. He sat slowly, feeling the weight of sleep still on him. Not a heaviness, but a gentle calm that seemed to cling to his thoughts. For a moment, he didn't move. He simply watched as the light from the high windows spilled across the floor, painting patterns of soft gold over the stones. Dust swirled lazily, catching the light like drifting stars. The fire gave one last sigh and went still. Only then did Alaric rise. He gathered his cloak and stepped quietly through the hall, careful not to disturb the hush that seemed sacred. The great doors opened with a slow, deep breath, letting in the cool morning air. Outside the courtyard awaited, wrapped in mist so thick it looked almost solid. The fountain murmured softly in the center, its water rippling like sleep. Ivy crept over the walls in long, graceful folds, their leaves silvered by dew. Every sound, the faint drip of water, the distant caw of a rook, came softened, like whispers behind a veil. Alaric followed the worn stone path that wound around the fountain and into a small garden beyond. The air smelled of wet earth, rosemary, and something faintly sweet, perhaps lavender still clinging to life, despite the autumn chill. He had always loved gardens, though not for their order. It was their silence that called to him, the way they spoke in colors, in scents, in stillness. And this garden, this one felt like the heart of the castle itself. Old stone benches rested beneath arching trees. A sundial leaned slightly to one side, its numbers nearly worn away. And in the center, surrounded by a ring of soft, white flowers, stood a marble statue, a woman in flowing robes, her face tilted upward as though listening to something far away. Alaric approached slowly. The closer he came, the more lifelike she seemed. Her hands were clasped loosely before her, her eyes half closed, her expression one of calm yearning. A small plaque lay at her feet, nearly hidden by moss. He brushed the leaves away to read it. Lady Elisande of Elderglow, keeper of the quiet garden. The name stirred something faint in his memory, perhaps from one of the old chronicles he had once studied. There had been mention, he thought, of a lady who tended to a castle garden so beloved that it was said to bloom even under moonlight. A legend of peace, not sorrow. He sat upon the nearest bench, breathing in the stillness. It was then that he heard it, a soft rustle behind the statue. Not sudden, not sharp, just the faint whisper of fabric moving through leaves. He turned his head slightly through the mist. A figure was walking slowly among the flowers. She moved with unhurried grace, her gown pale as moonlight, her hair loose, drifting like a veil in the cool air. She did not disturb the mist as she passed through it. She seemed to be part of it. Alaric did not startle. Something deep within him, perhaps the calm of the place itself, told him this was no danger. When she drew near the fountain, she paused, lifting her gaze toward him. Her eyes were soft, grey as early morning. There was no fear there, no sorrow, only the faint curiosity of one who has long forgotten what time means. He inclined his head slightly, a silent greeting. The woman smiled, almost imperceptibly. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, clear as water. "You found the garden," she said. It was not a question. "I did," Alaric replied, his voice just above a whisper. "It's beautiful," she nodded, looking around her with gentle pride. "It remembers the flowers?" he asked softly. "The place," she said, turning her gaze back to him. "It remembers every step that kindness ever took here, every gentle word, every moment of rest. The stones never forget peace." Alaric looked down at the damp path beneath his feet, feeling the truth of her words settle quietly in his chest. "You're the keeper," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "I was, long ago. But gardens don't need keeping forever. They keep themselves, if they are loved enough." Her voice held the weightless calm of someone unbound by time. She turned toward the fountain and reached out, her fingertips brushing the water. Ripples spread outward, soft and slow. Yet, as they moved, the mist seemed to brighten just a little, as though touched by light from within. Alaric watched in stillness. There was something healing about her presence, not mystical in a way that dazzled, but natural, as though she were part of the earth's own exhale. After a while, she looked back at him. "Why did you come here?" He hesitated. "To rest," he said finally. "To find quiet again." "Then you came to the right place," she said softly. "The castle listens. It has for centuries. It gathers the weary, keeps them until their breath slows, and then lets them go, lighter than before." Alaric felt a slow warmth behind his eyes, the kind that comes not from sadness, but from being understood. "Will you stay long?" she asked. "I think so," he replied. "For a while, at least." Her gaze drifted to the sky, where faint light was beginning to glow through the fog. "Then walk often," she said. "The paths remember footsteps. The flowers remember voices. Every gentle act makes the castle dream sweeter." And then, as quietly as the mist itself, she began to fade. Not vanish abruptly, but soften, like candlelight when the flame grows low. The folds of her gown shimmered once, twice, and were gone. The garden sighed. A single petal fell from the white flowers near the statue, landing soundlessly upon the grass. Alaric sat for a long while afterward, watching the ripples in the fountain. He felt no urge to question what he had seen. The world beyond Elderglow, with its noise and explanations, seemed far away, like a dream half remembered. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. The scent of the garden filled him with peace, old and deep. He thought of the woman's words. The stones never forget peace, and something within him eased further still. After a time, he He rose and walked the paths she had once tended. His hand brushed against the leaves, his steps slow and careful, as though not to wake the sleeping flowers dot everywhere. The mist seemed to part slightly for him, as if recognizing his presence now. The castle watched, not with eyes, but with memory. When he returned to the courtyard, the fountain glimmered brighter. The air seemed warmer. Even the distant crows sounded less like omens and more like echoes of a world still alive beyond the walls. The day drifted by in silence, and as dusk began to fall again, Alaric found himself back near the hall doors. The candles within had been lit once more, though he had not seen anyone light them. He smiled faintly and stepped inside. The same chair by the hearth waited for him, the same scent of wax and wood. The castle had accepted him, and in its slow, ancient way, it began to hum softly once more, a tone that could not quite be heard, only felt. Alaric closed his eyes. The warmth touched his face, and behind his thoughts, he sensed the garden still breathing, still alive with the presence of its gentle keeper. As the night deepened, the moon rose above the towers. The mist returned to its silver calm. And somewhere, between the world of waking and sleep, the faint voice of Lady Elisande whispered like a dream, "Rest well, wanderer. The castle dreams with you." The fire gave a quiet crackle. The lanterns dimmed, and peace settled once again like silk over the stones. The night folds in softly now, calm and complete. Chapter 3. The Feast of Forgotten Souls. Evening returned to Elderglow Keep as though it had never left. The sky beyond the towers melted into velvet blue, and a crescent moon hung low, pale as pearl. From the hills came the quiet song of crickets, steady and patient, a rhythm older than the castle itself. Inside the great hall, the candles were burning again. Alaric did not remember lighting them. Perhaps the air itself had done so, or the house, in its secret wisdom, had remembered how things once were. He walked through the corridor slowly, his footsteps softened by ancient rugs. The scent of beeswax and oak wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. Shadows moved across the walls, not with menace, but with grace, as if the past itself was stretching. Remembering how to breathe, he had begun to understand, in a way that needed no thought, that Elderglow Keep was not haunted by the dead. It was haunted by their peace. It held every soft echo of life that had ever filled its hall's laughter, footsteps, songs sung beside the fire, all still here, folded gently into the air. Tonight felt different though. There was a stillness to complete, a silence that seemed to wait. The castle, Alaric thought, was holding its breath. He followed the faint hum of music, a sound that rose and faded like the tide. It led him through an arched doorway into a long, vaulted room he hadn't yet explored. The space was vast and dim. A great table stretched from one end to the other, carved of dark wood, its surface smooth as water. Upon it stood goblets of silver, plates of gold, and candle holders twisted into the shapes of vines. The candles flickered with that familiar steady calm, each one casting a gentle halo, and then faintly he saw them, figures seated along the table, their forms translucent as mist. They did not move sharply. They swayed gently, like reflections in rippling water. Some wore the soft outlines of old finery, laced collars, velvet cloaks, embroidered sleeves. Others were simpler, dressed in the garments of farmers or servants. All were gathered as though waiting for a feast to begin. At the far end of the table stood a woman with hair the color of moonlight. She raised her goblet slowly, her face serene. It was the same presence he had felt in the garden, Lady Elisande. Her voice, when it came, drifted softly through the air. Tonight, we remember. The other figures bowed their heads in silence. Alaric remained by the door, unsure whether to stay or retreat. But no one turned to him. The air felt calm, inviting, not meant to frighten, but to soothe. He took a slow step forward. As he did, the candles along the walls brightened slightly. The great hearth at the far end of the room came alive with golden light, though no one tended it. Warmth spread through the chamber, chasing away the chill dot. Then, as though some invisible host had entered, the table filled, not suddenly, but gently, with food and drink. Platters of bread and cheese, fruits glistening like jewels, roasted nuts, steaming pies fragrant with herbs and honey. The scent was faint, like memory, a taste of something too far gone to touch. The figures raised their goblets again. Elisande smiled faintly. "For those who have forgotten how to rest," she said softly. "For those who wander without peace. Tonight they dine." Her words carried no sorrow. They were a benediction, a promise. The music swelled slightly, the sound of viols and flutes, low and tender. No one played them, yet the air shimmered with melody. Alaric moved closer, drawn not by curiosity but by comfort. He felt like a guest who had arrived late to a gathering that had waited centuries for him. Elisande's gaze turned toward him. "You may sit, if you wish," she said. He hesitated, his heart slow and steady. "Will I disturb you?" She shook her head. "You are part of the remembrance now." He took a seat near the middle of the table. The chair was warm beneath his hands, though its carvings were worn smooth by time. The goblet before him glowed faintly, filled with dark red wine that seemed made of starlight rather than grapes. He lifted it gently, mirroring the others. "To peace," he murmured. The faintest smile curved Elisande's lips. "To peace," she echoed. Then the music deepened. The air shimmered brighter, and as if on cue, the guests began to fade. Not vanish, but blend into the golden glow of the hall, becoming light itself. Alaric did not move. He felt their calm settle over him like falling snow. Each flicker of the candles seemed to hold a memory. A laugh, a voice, a sigh. He began to realize that these were not restless ghosts at all. They were simply dreams replaying themselves, echoes of warmth that refused to die. Time lost its meaning. He might have sat there minutes or hours. The air grew heavy with tranquility, the kind that makes thought slow and sweet. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he thought he heard words among the music. Every soul leaves behind a light, and every light becomes a memory, and every memory a song. When he opened his eyes again, the feast had changed. The table was empty once more, the food and candles gone. The air filled only with the faint scent of lavender and smoke. Elisande still stood at the far end. Her expression was soft, tender. "They return each year," she said, "not to haunt, but to remember what peace feels like." They stay only as long as the living need them. Alaric nodded slowly. Do they ever rest completely? She glanced toward the window, where moonlight shimmered across the glass. When all is remembered, yes. But the world forgets too easily, and so the castle remembers for it. Her eyes met his. You understand now, he did. Not with words, but with stillness. The castle was not a tomb. It was a sanctuary, a vessel of memory, holding the gentlest parts of history. The laughter, the kindness, the quiet songs of those who had once called it home. Elisande moved closer, her figure luminous against the dim hall. You've brought new peace here, she said softly. That is enough. The candles flickered once more, and with that, the music faded entirely. The silence that followed was not empty, but full of rest. Alaric sat a moment longer, his hands folded loosely before him. He could feel the warmth of unseen hearts still lingering. Then, slowly, he stood. As he made his way back to the great hearth, he paused and looked over his shoulder. The hall was quiet again. Only the faint glow of the moon traced the edges of the table, and where Elisande had stood, a single white flower now rested, glowing faintly in the candlelight. He reached for it, lifting it gently between his fingers. It felt cool, like water, yet alive. When he returned to his room near the western tower, he placed the flower upon the windowsill. Outside, the fog rolled gently through the moonlit fields, and the sound of distant bells drifted through the air. Soft, hollow, soothing. He lay down upon the old feather bed, the scent of lavender still lingering on his hands. His thoughts slowed, his breath deepened, and as sleep began to take him, he imagined the long hall once more, the feast, the candles, the laughter that was not laughter but light. He smiled faintly, knowing that somewhere within the heart of Elderglow Keep, the forgotten souls still dined, not in sorrow, but in joy, bound forever by peace. Outside, the night folded its arms around the world. The castle, ancient and kind, whispered back to the stars, and the wind, like a lullaby, carried its promise across the hills. Rest, for all is well. The feast continues in dreams. Chapter 4. The Library of Eternal Candlelight. The next evening came quietly, dressed in velvet shadows and silver light. A soft rain had fallen at dusk, leaving the air cool and scented with earth and stone. The mist that rose from the courtyard now curled around the castle like a shawl. Tender and protective, Alaric had slept long and dreamlessly. When he awoke, the world seemed slower, gentler, as though even time had softened its pace for him. He lit a small lantern and followed the hallways he had not yet explored. The castle seemed to guide him, its corridors opening and closing like the pages of a great book turning themselves. He passed arched windows, each filled with moonlight. Tapestries hung along the walls, scenes of quiet fields, peaceful hunts, harvest dances, all woven in colors, faded by centuries. The air smelled faintly of ink, paper, and melted wax. Soon he came to a door unlike the others. It was carved with delicate runes, spirals of ivy, and the faint outline of a quill. The brass handle was warm to the touch, as though someone had just turned it. He hesitated, then opened the door. A breath of stillness greeted him, soft, deep. Endless dot, inside lay the library of eternal candlelight. The room stretched high and far, filled with the scent of parchment and polished oak. Thousands of books lined the walls, their spines glimmering gold and brown in the dim light. Candles floated gently in the air, not held by stands or glass, but suspended, drifting slowly as if borne by invisible hands. Their flames burned steady, without smoke. Alaric stepped inside, and the door closed softly behind him. The sound was comforting, like the closing of a cocoon. Around a dream, he walked slowly between the shelves, running his fingertips along the bindings. The books hummed faintly under his touch, each one carrying a subtle pulse, a rhythm like a heartbeat. It was as though the stories within them still breathed, waiting for someone to listen. A long reading table stretched through the center of the room. It was covered with open tomes, quills resting in ink pots, and scrolls half unrolled, as though their readers had only stepped away for a moment. Centuries ago, in the quiet air, Alaric could hear the faintest whispers. Not words exactly, more like the sighs of thought, the sound of memory turning its pages. He took a seat at the table and reached for one of the open volumes. Its pages were thick and soft, filled with elegant handwriting. The ink shimmered faintly in the candlelight, as though it had never dried. At the top of the first page, in looping script, he read, "A record of dreams dreamt within these walls." He smiled softly, tracing the line with his fingertip. The entries that followed were gentle, simple lists of names, nights, and fragments of dreams. Lady Rowan dreamt of rain upon her hands. A boy named Cedric dreamt of a white horse and a hill of silver grass. The steward dreamt of bells ringing, though no one was there to hear. Page after page, they went on, each dream described in the same calm tone, as if every one were equally sacred. As Alaric turned the pages, he realized that the book had no end. It continued beyond reason, an endless record of peaceful dreams stretching through time. He leaned back, exhaling softly. "A library of dreams," he murmured. "Not stories of war or kings, but of sleep." A soft sound stirred behind him, the faint rustle of a robe, the quiet step of bare feet on stone. He turned dot at the far end of the hall. A figure stood beneath the largest floating candle. It was an old man, dressed in robes of midnight blue. His hair was silver, long and thin, and his eyes were pale as clouds. Yet his face was kind, worn by time, but not wearied by it. The man inclined his head. "You've found my library," he said, his voice a gentle echo. Alaric stood. "Are you the librarian?" The man smiled faintly. "Once. Now I am more of a listener." He moved closer, his steps so soft that not even dust stirred. "I keep the dreams safe," he said. "Every soul who has ever rested here leaves behind a whisper. The castle gathers them, and I write them down." Alaric looked round at the shelves, their endless rows. "All of these are dreams." "Yes," the old man said. "Dreams of comfort, dreams of release. The restless dreams fade quickly, but the peaceful ones, those last forever." There was silence between them, the kind that feels like understanding. The librarian walked to one of the shelves and drew out a narrow volume bound in pale leather. He handed it to Alaric. "This one was written for the night you arrived," he said softly. Alaric blinked. "Mine," the old man nodded. He opened the book carefully. Inside, in the same glowing ink, was written a single line. A traveler arrived, weary of the world. The castle welcomed him, and he began to dream again. Alaric felt his breath slow. It was written already. The librarian's eyes twinkled faintly. "The castle writes what it feels before we do. It knew your heart before you spoke." The candles above them flickered softly, as though agreeing. The librarian gestured toward the far corner of the room. "You may stay here a while, if you wish. Read, rest, dream. The books will not hurry you." Alaric smiled gently. "You don't fear the silence?" "The silence," the old man said, "is the sound of stories sleeping." He bowed his head slightly, then drifted back into the deeper shadows of the library. Within moments he was gone, or perhaps only hidden by the shelves. Lost among the books that glowed faintly with the warmth of forgotten thoughts. Alaric sat again and read. He lost track of time. Each book he opened seemed to hum softly, the words flowing like lullabies. Some pages spoke of distant fields, others of soft rivers, others still of moonlight on stone. There were no tragedies here, no battles, no endings, only continuing peace. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy. He let the book rest upon the table and leaned back, the candlelight swaying gently above him. The air smelled of parchment and calm. Somewhere, faintly, he heard the whisper of the librarian's voice. Every dream leaves its echo, and every echo becomes another candle. He looked up, and indeed, among the floating candles, one more had appeared, burning softly, its flame steady and golden. Perhaps it was his. He smiled faintly, and let his eyes close. The books around him seemed to sigh with him, 1,000 gentle breaths blending into one. The pages turned themselves now and then, the way leaves do in a soft breeze, and slowly the castle's dream folded over him once more, warm, endless, safe. Outside, rain began again, soft, even tender. It tapped against the windows like the quietest applause, and as Alaric drifted toward sleep, his final thought was simple and sure. If peace can be written, let it be written here. The candles shimmered once, and the library held him like a cradle. The castle sighed. The rain deepened, and in the hush of that eternal room, words and dreams became one. Chapter 5. The music beneath the moon, the rain passed by dawn, leaving the world washed and glimmering. Thin veils of mist rose from the castle grounds, curling like ribbons across the lawns and drifting lazily into the air. The sky had taken on the palest hue of silver blue, soft as morning milk. Alaric awoke to silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, a hush that listens, that breathes. The candles in the library had dimmed, their flames now tiny golden beads resting upon pools of wax. Somewhere in the castle, a clock chimed once, then again, echoing gently through the stone halls. He stretched, slow and unhurried, and smiled. His body felt lighter, his mind smoother, as though the quiet of the night had polished his thoughts clean. Leaving the library, he wandered back through the great corridors. The castle seemed to glow faintly in the pale morning light. Every window shimmered with the reflection of the mist outside, and the air smelled faintly of dew and wood smoke. He made his way toward a spiral staircase he hadn't noticed before. The steps curved gracefully upward, the stone cool beneath his hand. He followed them without a plan, guided only by the soft rhythm of his own breath. When he reached the top, he found himself before a tall arched doorway draped with pale blue curtains. Behind it came the faintest sound, soft notes of a harp, played so delicately they might have been woven by the air itself. Curious. Alaric lifted the curtain and stepped inside. The room beyond was circular, crowned with a glass dome that opened directly to the sky. Through it, the morning light poured in, clear, pure, and gentle. In the center of the room stood a harp of silver strings, shaped like the crescent moon, and beside it sat a woman, her hair long and pale as frost, her gown the color of dusk. She played without looking at the strings, her fingers moving with the ease of memory. The sound was slow, drifting, endless, like the pulse of waves against a distant shore. Alaric stood very still, not wishing to disturb the music. It seemed to reach through him, loosening everything that was tight, smoothing everything that was tangled. Each note rose softly, then fell away into silence, as if dissolving back into the air that had birthed it. The woman spoke without turning. Her voice was low, melodic, as if part of the song itself. "You walk softly, traveler. The castle approves." Alaric smiled faintly. "I heard your music. It's unlike anything I've ever known." She turned to face him. Her eyes were the color of twilight, not blue, not gray, but something between. "It is not mine," she said gently. "The music belongs to the moon. I only borrow it." He tilted his head slightly. "Borrow it?" She nodded. "Each night, when the moon rises over these towers, it hums. Not for everyone, only for those who have learned to be still. The castle remembers its song, and I play what it remembers." Her fingers brushed the strings again, and a soft vibration filled the air. The sound lingered like perfume, sweet, distant, fading. Alaric closed his eyes for a moment, listening. The music seemed to shape visions behind his eyelids, misty meadows, silver lakes, and candlelit chambers. It was as if the castle's heart itself was singing. When the last note faded, the silence that followed felt rich, not empty. He opened his eyes. "Do you play only for the moon?" "Not always," she said softly. "Sometimes I play for those who need rest. Sometimes for the dreams of those who have forgotten how to dream. The castle listens, and it hums with me. Can you hear it?" Alaric listened carefully. At first there was only quiet, then, faintly, deep within the stones themselves, he heard a low resonance. A hum so soft it was almost a feeling rather than a sound. "Yes," he whispered. "It's like the castle is breathing." The woman smiled. "Exactly so. It has breathed for centuries, slowly, kindly. When people sleep here, it listens to their hearts. And when they wake, it hums their peace back into the world." Her words drifted through the air like warm smoke. Alaric moved to one of the open windows. Outside, the mist had thinned. The courtyard below glowed with morning dew, and the distant hills shimmered faintly in the sun. Somewhere far below, The river wound its way through the valley, its surface gleaming like silk. "How long have you played here?" he asked quietly. The woman looked down at her hands. "Long enough for the moon to call me its echo," she said. "But time doesn't pass the same way within these walls. When the castle accepts you, you live between moments." Her gaze softened. "Perhaps that is why you were called here." Alaric turned toward her. "Called?" She nodded. "The castle knows the weary. It calls to those who have walked too long in noise. When you entered its gates, it already knew what you sought. Not answers, but quiet." Her words settled gently into the room, like feathers falling. He let out a slow breath. "And the music helps. It soothes what words cannot," she said. "When night returns and the moon climbs high again, you will hear it differently. You may even begin to hum with it, softly, without meaning to. That is how it begins." She plucked another string, and a single pure note rang out. A sound so clean it felt like silver water rippling in the soul. The note hung in the air, then faded into silence. "Listen," she whispered. Through the open dome, the faintest breeze entered, carrying with it the sound of the castle itself, the whisper of leaves, the creak of wood, the sigh of faraway waves of air moving through hollow stone. Together, they formed a slow, natural rhythm, a lullaby, older than any song. Alaric closed his eyes again, letting the sounds blend: harp, wind, stone, silence. He felt his breath sinking with it, his heartbeat slowing, his thoughts dissolving. When he opened his eyes once more, the woman was watching him with a faint smile. "Now you are listening as the castle listens," she said softly. "Not with ears, but with stillness." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Good," she whispered. "Then let me show you what the moon sounds like when it dreams." She began to play again, slower, this time deeper, the notes low and round. They rolled through the room like gentle tides. The light above dimmed as a cloud passed across the sun, turning the silver harp strings to shades of pearl. The melody carried no sadness, no longing, only release. It was the kind of music that unties knots without words, that smooths the wrinkles of thought. Alaric felt his eyes grow heavy once more, his body warm, his mind quiet. He sat upon the floor beside the harp and simply breathed as she played. He imagined the moon as a living thing, soft-faced, luminous, watching kindly over the earth. He imagined it whispering songs into the castle's stones, which then carried them through every hall, every room, every sleeping soul. The air grew softer still. Eventually, the notes faded to silence once more. The harpist's hands came to rest gently upon her lap. She looked at Alaric and smiled. "When the moon rises tonight, return here," she said. "You will hear the rest of the song, the part only the night can play." He nodded slowly. Rising, he bowed his head in gratitude. "Your music feels like rest itself." She laughed softly, a sound like wind through glass. "That is all it is meant to be." As he turned to leave, the harp glowed faintly, not from light, but from sound remembered. The woman's silhouette shimmered in the morning sun, becoming almost translucent, like mist itself. By the time he looked back once more, she was gone, only the harp remained, and from it rose one final note, a long, slow hum that lingered even as he walked away. It followed him down the stairs, through the corridors, and out into the courtyard, where the last drops of dew sparkled like tiny mirrors catching the light. And somewhere deep within the castle walls, the music continued, not heard, but felt, like the breath of the moon, like the heartbeat of peace itself. Chapter 6. The Feast of Shadows and Candlelight * evening returned like a sigh. The sun melted behind the hills, and the world dimmed to that tender blue between day and night, the hour when shadows forget to frighten and begin, instead, to rest. The castle glowed faintly beneath the sky, its towers wrapped in twilight mist. Windows flickered to life, one by one, each candle a small promise against the dark. Somewhere deep within the halls, bells chimed low and long, summoning those who still wandered to gather once more. Alaric stood by the arched window of his chamber, watching the courtyard below. Dozens of lanterns now floated above the cobblestones, not tethered, but drifting gently, glowing gold against the indigo air. They moved in rhythm with the night breeze, like a slow dance of light. He had spent the afternoon in quiet reflection, walking the gardens, touching the ancient stone walls, feeling the life that pulsed through them. Every sound seemed softened, every color subdued. Even the air felt aware, as though the castle itself was preparing for something sacred. When the 9th bell tolled, Alaric followed the flickering lamps that lined the corridor. Their flames bent toward him as he passed. Like living things offering guidance, he soon came to the great hall, a vast chamber of arched ceilings and carved oak beams. Tonight, it looked transformed. Hundreds of candles floated in slow circles above the long wooden tables, their light golden and kind. Shadows moved like gentle silk across the walls, creating shapes that seemed to breathe, soft ghosts of memory rather than fear. At the far end of the hall, a fire burned steadily in the hearth, not fierce but calm. Its glow painted the stones in shades of amber and rose. The room was filled not with people, but with presences. Figures faint and shimmering silhouettes of those who had once lived, now gathered in quiet companionship. They sat at the tables as if at peace, their faces serene, their eyes reflecting the candlelight like glassy water. A hush lay over everything, but it was not empty. It was full of memory, of warmth, of unspoken understanding. At the head of the table stood the librarian, his robe dark and flowing. Beside him, the woman of the silver harp. They greeted Alaric with small, knowing smiles. "Welcome," the librarian said softly. "You have come on the night of remembrance, the castle's oldest feast. Once a year, when autumn leans toward winter, we dine not in hunger, but in gratitude." Alaric bowed slightly. "I am honored." The harpist's voice was like breath over glass. "Then sit and let the quiet feed you." He took a seat at the nearest table. Before him lay a simple wooden plate and a silver goblet filled with something that shimmered faintly. Like moonlight caught in water, he lifted it to his lips. The drink was cool, faintly sweet, a taste that reminded him of rain or tears of joy, or something he had once known as a child but forgotten long ago. All around him, the spectral figures lifted their own goblets in unison. The librarian raised his hand. "To those who came before, he said gently. And to those who dream still. The hall echoed softly with murmurs, the sound of wind passing through distant trees. Then the feast began. There was no clatter of cutlery, no bustle or noise. Instead, dishes appeared silently, bowls of fruit that glowed from within, loaves of bread that steamed without fire, platters of herbs and petals glistening with dew. Each offering seemed more like an idea of food than food itself. Nourishment for the spirit rather than the body. When Alaric touched the bread, it dissolved into warmth, filling his chest with a gentle light. The fruit melted on his tongue like sunlight. Every flavor was soft and kind, no spice, no salt, only peace. The harpist moved to the center of the hall and began to play again. This time, her melody was low and round, echoing the rhythm of the flames. The floating candles swayed in time, rising and falling like a tide of golden breath. As the music grew, the shadows along the walls began to move. Slowly, gracefully, they shaped themselves into scenes, not of ghosts or sorrow, but of memory. There was a garden blooming under a full moon, a mother rocking her child beside a fire, a knight laying down his sword to watch the sunrise, a scribe falling asleep upon his parchment, candlelight pooling around his ink-stained hands. Each shadow was tender, soft-edged, like a painting in mist. Alaric watched, entranced. His heart felt full, not of sadness, but of gentle awe. He turned to the librarian. "They are memories." The old man nodded. "Yes, the castle remembers all who have lived in peace within its walls. Their joy lingers, their rest becomes light. Tonight, we share in that rest." The harpist's melody shifted, higher now, more ethereal. The air itself seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, the entire hall looked like it was floating between worlds. The librarian spoke again, his voice low, rhythmic, and soothing. "When the veil of the year grows thin, the living and the resting dine as kin. No fear, no cry, no shadow grim, only the song that sleeps within." The gathered figures bowed their heads. The candles dipped lower, their flames touching the tops of the tables, not burning, only blessing. Alaric felt tears form without sorrow. The warmth of the fire, the music, the quiet unity. It was more than comfort. It was belonging. The librarian leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for him. "Now you understand why this place is called haunted, not by fear, but by peace too deep to leave." Alaric smiled faintly. "Then may I be haunted forever." The librarian chuckled softly, the sound warm as embers. "Perhaps you already are." The harpist's song reached its final verse. The shadows faded, the feast slowly dimmed. One by one, the spectral figures lifted their goblets again, and with each sip, they dissolved into soft trails of light, floating upward like lanterns into the air. Soon, only Alaric, the librarian, and the harpist remained. The librarian placed a gentle hand upon his shoulder. "You may stay until dawn," he said. "After that, the castle will dream again, but it will remember you as it remembers all who find peace here." Alaric nodded, his heart heavy and light all at once. He sat alone for a while as the candles began to fade. The music slowed, then ceased, leaving only the soft crackle of the fire and the faint whisper of night through the high windows. He closed his eyes. The silence wrapped around him like a blanket, filled with 1,000 unseen voices, not speaking, but humming, softly, endlessly. Peacefully, it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of completion, the kind that comes when every story has been told, and every heart, for a moment, has found rest. Chapter 7. The ghost in the garden *. The feast had faded into stillness. The last candle sighed out, and the hall fell into that tender darkness that feels more like a lullaby than the absence of light. Alaric sat a while longer, letting the warmth of the moment linger within him. The castle no longer felt vast or unfamiliar. It felt alive, as if its heart beat softly alongside his. When he finally rose, the librarian and the harpist had vanished, their presence folded quietly into the hush of the walls. Only the glow from the fireplace remained, painting a narrow path toward the corridor. Alaric followed it, his footsteps slow and soundless. He wandered through passageways he no longer tried to memorize, letting the castle lead him where it wished. Every hallway curved with a certain grace. Every arch seemed to open precisely when he arrived. He passed a tall window and paused. Outside, the mist had returned, silver and weightless, drifting across the gardens. It cooled softly, like breath upon glass, an unspoken invitation. Without knowing why, Alaric descended the nearest staircase and made his way to the courtyard doors. They opened easily, the hinges whispering rather than creaking, and the cool night air met him like a calm embrace. The garden was a dream. Moonlight rested upon every leaf, every petal, every stone. The fountain at its heart shimmered with liquid light, its surface still as glass, except for the gentle ripple of water spilling from a marble bowl above. No insects stirred, no birds sang. The silence was deep and kind, the kind that allows the soul to breathe. Alaric walked along the cobbled path, the soft scent of lavender and rosemary guiding him. His fingertips brushed the tops of the flowers, cool with dew dot. As he reached the fountain, he noticed something, a faint shape reflected in the water. It was a woman, standing on the opposite side, her gown pale as moonlight itself. She did not startle him. Her presence was like the mist, quiet, natural, and serene. Alaric bowed his head slightly. "Good evening," he said softly. The woman looked up. Her eyes glowed faintly, silver with gentleness. "You are the traveler," she said in a voice so calm it seemed to blend with the sound of water. "I am," he replied. "And you?" She smiled a small, timeless smile. "Once, I was the keeper of these gardens. My hands tended every vine, every root, every petal. But the years grew weary, and now I only tend their dreams." Alaric glanced around. "You still care for them?" "Yes," she whispered. "They remember kindness, even from long ago. Flowers grow best in love that never ends." She moved gracefully around the fountain, her steps leaving faint ripples of light upon the cobblestones. Her form was faint, translucent, more glow than figure, yet every motion felt real, steady and purposeful. She paused by a tall rosebush, its blooms open wide beneath the moon. Gently, she traced a fingertip along one of the petals. It shimmered, brighter for a moment, When I was alive, she said softly, I worried the world would forget me. That when I was gone, the garden would wilt and fade. But the castle remembers. The flowers still open, even when no one watches. Her gaze lifted toward him. Do you see, traveler? The quiet keeps things alive. Alaric nodded slowly. Yes, he said. Perhaps it is silence that truly nourishes. The woman smiled again, and for a moment her outline grew sharper, her face soft and youthful. Her eyes filled with the peace of someone who has already found what she sought. On nights like this, she continued, I walk among the blooms and listen. Each flower tells me what it has seen. The lovers who walked beneath them, the laughter of children, the rain that softened the earth. Nothing is ever truly lost here. Alaric stepped closer to the fountain, peering into the water. He could see the reflection of the stars, bright and endless. And do they ever speak of sorrow? He asked quietly. Sometimes, she said, but only in whispers. The earth listens kindly, and pain softens when held gently. The wind moved through the garden, then soft, slow, and warm. The lavender bowed, the roses trembled. The air shimmered faintly, as if the entire garden exhaled at once. She closed her eyes, breathing in deeply. Do you hear it? Alaric listened. At first, only silence, and then, faintly, the murmur of countless voices. Not human voices, but the rustling of petals, the sigh of leaves, the drip of dew onto stone. Together they formed a rhythm, the slow heartbeat of the garden itself. Yes, he whispered. It's beautiful, she nodded. Every living thing hums in its sleep. The garden's hum is what keeps the castle dreaming. They stood together in that tranquil space, both gazing into the fountain where the moon swam upon the water's surface. After a long, comfortable silence, she spoke again. Do you know what night this is? Halloween, he said softly, or what some call All Hallows' Eve. She nodded gently. Yes, once. It was the night when spirits walked restlessly. But here, in this place, it is not restlessness that calls us back, it is gratitude. We return not to haunt, but to watch over what still blooms. Her fingers trailed across the water, sending small ripples outward. The living and the resting meet again under the same moon, sharing the same breath. That is all eternity really is, the same breath, continued. The words settled into the air like feathers. Alaric closed his eyes, letting the thought fill him. The same breath, continued. When he opened them, the garden felt even gentler. The mist glowed faintly gold, as though dawn might already be considering its arrival far beyond the hills. Will you stay? She asked softly. The castle holds many who wander for a while, finding rest before they return to the world outside. He smiled faintly. I don't yet know, he said. Perhaps I am still learning how to be quiet. She touched a fingertip to the surface of the fountain. A single droplet rose and floated toward him, glowing softly before settling on his palm. It was warm, like the first moment of sunlight. Then take this, she said. When you leave, it will remind you peace is not found. It is remembered. He closed his fingers around the light, and it faded into him, leaving behind only a soft warmth in his chest. When he looked up again, she was fading, her form becoming more transparent, her voice now almost part of the breeze. Do not fear the quiet traveler, she whispered. It is where everything kind begins. And with that, she was gone, leaving only the faint shimmer of moonlight upon the water, and the perfume of roses lingering in the air. Alaric stood for a long while, feeling no loneliness, no ache, only stillness, vast and kind. He sat by the fountain's edge, resting his hands upon the cool stone, and let his thoughts dissolve completely. The stars above glowed brighter, the mist thinned, and somewhere in the far-off towers, the silver harp began to play again, faint, distant, like a lullaby carried by the wind. He smiled, closing his eyes. The music, the scent of the garden, the calm pulse of the earth beneath him, all of it joined into one quiet rhythm. And when he breathed out, it was as though the castle breathed with him. Together, they exhaled peace into the night. Chapter 8. The Whispering Portraits. By the time Alaric left the garden, the night had deepened into a silvery calm. The moon hung high above the towers, pouring its light across the roofs like a river of milk. The air was cool and damp, perfumed by roses and faint woods. Every sound, the drip of water, the soft sigh of the wind, seemed softened, cradled in the stillness that wrapped the castle like a blanket. Alaric moved slowly along the cobbled paths until he reached the western wing, a part of the castle he hadn't yet explored. A long corridor stretched before him, lined with tall windows on one side and rows of portraits on the other. He hesitated a moment at the threshold. The hallway was bathed in a gentle, golden glow, not from candles, but from the moonlight reflecting through the glass and scattering over the floor like spilled silk. The portraits along the wall shimmered faintly, as if their subjects breathed within their painted frames. The air here was different, softer still, heavier with memory. He stepped inside. Each portrait was beautifully detailed, their eyes calm and kind. Some depicted kings and queens draped in robes of silver thread. Others showed knights with swords resting harmlessly on their laps, or scholars surrounded by scrolls and books. None bore expressions of pride or power, only a quiet awareness, as though they were listening. As Alaric walked, he felt a subtle vibration in the air, a hum so faint it was almost thought rather than sound. It came, he realized, from the paintings themselves. He stopped before one, a portrait of an old woman with silver hair braided neatly down her shoulder. Her gaze was soft, her lips curved in a knowing smile. The air shimmered faintly, and then, very gently, she spoke. "Traveler," she whispered, her voice calm as still water, "you've walked far into our peace." Alaric bowed slightly. "I have," he said, "and yet I feel as though the castle walks with me." She nodded within her frame. "It does. We all do. Each of us left a breath behind, a sigh, a thought too kind to fade. The walls remember us, and through them we remember you." Her eyes seemed to twinkle with faint light, like candle flames reflecting in glass. Alaric took a step closer. "Were you the castle's mistress?" "No," she said softly, "only its friend. I came here to rest many winters ago, as you have, and when my final night came, I asked to remain, not in body, but in memory." The painter knew how to grant that wish. Alaric glanced around. The painter, The woman smiled gently. He was the first to listen deeply enough to the silence. His art did not capture likeness, it captured stillness. When he painted, he did not look with his eyes, but with his heart. And so we remained. Her gaze turned toward the other portraits along the wall. You will find us all awake tonight. Halloween grants memory its voice. As if in response, the corridor filled with faint murmurs, not ghostly, but soothing. Each painting seemed to exhale its own soft whisper, a fragment of its story told to the moonlight. A man in armor murmured a prayer of gratitude. A young maiden hummed a lullaby too old for words. A scholar whispered the last line of a poem he'd never finished. All together, their sounds wove through the hall like a slow, invisible breeze. Alaric listened, feeling no fear, only an expanding calm. As though his own heartbeat had joined their rhythm, he stopped before a painting of a young boy holding a lantern. The boy's eyes were bright, his smile gentle. Beneath the portrait, in tiny lettering, was written, "He carried the last light of autumn." Alaric smiled. And did he? The boy's painted eyes seemed to glimmer. Yes, came the faintest whisper. Every autumn ends with someone remembering its warmth. The simplicity of it filled Alaric's chest with a quiet ache, not sadness, but something close to longing for beauty that never demanded to be seen. He continued down the corridor. The whispers rose and fell around him like the sound of the tide. He came at last to the final painting, larger than all the rest. It showed the castle itself under a full moon, exactly as it looked tonight. Its towers rose into a misted sky, its windows glowed faintly, and the surrounding gardens shimmered with dew. At first it seemed just a painting, but then he saw movement. The candlelight flickered inside the painted castle's windows. The mist within the scene shifted, curling slowly around its towers. It was alive, a mirror of the very moment he was living. And from within the painted castle came a whisper, soft and deep, the voice not of a person, but of the castle itself. I remember all who have found rest in my walls. I remember their dreams, their laughter, their quiet. I hold them not in sorrow, but in sleep. The sound vibrated gently through the corridor walls. Every portrait bowed its head slightly, as if in reverence. Alaric placed a hand upon the frame. The paint beneath his fingers was warm, pulsing faintly with life. He whispered back, "And do you remember me?" The castle's voice sighed softly, kind as dusk. "Not yet, but soon. When you have rested enough to leave, I will remember you, too, not as a traveler, but as peace." Alaric closed his eyes. The words felt like a lullaby wrapping itself around his thoughts. He stood there for a long time, the hum of the portraits surrounding him like the world's gentlest choir. One by one, the whispers began to fade, not abruptly, but slowly, like the last notes of a song dissolving into air. The woman in the silver hair spoke once more, her tone like the rustle of leaves in a soft wind. "Go, traveler. Rest now. The night still holds you kindly." He bowed his head to her. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, the moonlight dimmed slightly and the corridor grew still again. The portraits returned to silence, their painted eyes peaceful, their smiles eternal. Outside, the wind had softened to nothing. The castle seemed to sigh, the kind of sound a mother makes when her child has finally fallen asleep. Alaric stepped back into the courtyard, feeling the quiet fold round him once more. The air was cool, fragrant, alive. He tilted his head toward the moon and whispered, "I think I understand now." and though there was no reply, the silence that followed felt like agreement. He began to walk toward the northern tower, his footsteps light, his heart slow. Behind him, the windows glowed faintly again, one by one, as if the portraits were watching kindly, ensuring that their newest guest found the peace they all once sought. He smiled softly. The castle had remembered him already. Let the hush of the portraits fade behind us now. The castle grows even quieter, as though the very air has grown sleepy. Tonight, the moon will rest to. Close your eyes, breathe, and let us drift into Chapter 9. The night the moon slept, the hours moved softly past midnight. The castle lay beneath a sky so calm, so still pale, that time itself seemed to be holding its breath. The moon, ever watchful, ever glowing, had begun to dim, its edges fading into a cloud of soft mist. The stars around it shimmered faintly, as though drowsy from watching over the world for too long. Alaric walked slowly through the outer courtyard, where the air smelled of wet stone and the faint sweetness of ivy. The wind had fallen silent. Even the crickets, which usually sang from the hedges, had grown still. It was as if the entire world was sinking into a deeper dream. He stopped near a stone well in the center of the courtyard. Its rim was covered in moss, glistening under what little moonlight remained. When he leaned over its edge, he saw not his reflection, but the reflection of the sleeping moon, its faint silver surface rippling gently in the dark water. He whispered to it, almost without thinking, "Even the moon needs rest." The sound of his voice echoed softly against the ancient walls, then faded. He took a seat on the stone edge of the well, folding his hands in his lap. He could feel the night thickening around him, not with fear or cold, but with the softness of surrender, the world yielding itself to peace. Then came the faintest sound, a long, slow creak from the western gate. It was not a warning, nor a call, just a sound of something old remembering movement. Alaric rose and walked toward it, his steps light, his cloak brushing gently over the stones. The gate stood half open, leading to a small orchard he hadn't yet seen, beyond the archway. Rows of apple trees stretched out, their branches heavy with fruit. Each apple shone faintly in the dim light, as though holding a tiny drop of moonlight inside it. The air smelled faintly sweet, like cider and autumn rain. A small bench stood beneath the largest tree, and beside it, a figure sat quietly. It was the old caretaker, the same one Alaric had met when he first arrived. His lantern was unlit, resting on his knee. Alaric approached slowly. "You're awake still." The caretaker smiled without opening his eyes. "Tonight, no one truly sleeps, not even the moon. She only dreams closer to the earth." Alaric glanced up. Indeed, the moon had sunk lower, almost touching the distant hills. Its light was softer now, more like the breath of a candle than the shine of silver. He sat beside the caretaker. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply listened to the breeze moving through the branches. to the faint rustle of apples shifting against one another, to the heartbeat of stillness that filled the orchard. At last, Alaric said, "I heard the portraits speak tonight." The caretaker smiled again, eyes still closed. "Yes. They whisper every Halloween, but not in fear. It's their way of remembering warmth, of thanking the living for carrying the silence onward." "The silence?" Alaric asked softly. The caretaker nodded. "Peace, stillness, rest. They are all the same thing when spoken in the castle's language. The walls have no need for noise. They speak in quiet." A gentle wind brushed across them, cool and fragrant. An apple fell from a nearby branch and rolled to Alaric's feet. He picked it up carefully. Its surface was smooth and cold, but when he brought it close, it seemed to hum faintly, a vibration almost like a heartbeat. He smiled. "Even the apples remember something." "They do," said the caretaker. "Each one holds a dream the moon gave it before she went to sleep. That's why they glow a little on nights like this." The orchard shimmered faintly all around them, the apples glowing softly, rhythmically, as if breathing. The sight was mesmerizing, the entire grove pulsing in time with the quiet of the earth. The caretaker's voice grew slower, softer. "The moon must rest sometimes, just as men do. And when she does, her dreams drift downward, finding small homes in apples, in water, in stones. They rest until morning. Then they rise again, unseen." Alaric listened in silence, the caretaker's words sinking into him like rain into soil. He looked down at the apple again and whispered, "What happens when she wakes?" The caretaker smiled faintly. "The world begins again." He opened his eyes then, and for a moment they reflected the moonlight like pools of calm water. "Would you like to see her dream?" he asked. Alaric hesitated, unsure what he meant, but nodded. The caretaker reached out and gently touched the apple in Alaric's hands. The glow within it brightened, then widened, a soft beam of silver light spilling outward, floating upward between them like a small, glowing mist within it. Images began to form, slow and liquid, like memories seen underwater. He saw a forest bathed in silver, a river perfectly still, mirroring the stars, a white owl flying low over quiet fields, a child laughing in a candlelit room, a woman humming by a hearth. 1,000 small moments of tenderness, each glowing, each fleeting, each too gentle for daylight, and through it all, the soft hum of peace, endless and calm. The caretaker spoke quietly. "That is her dream, the memory of every kindness ever left unfinished." Alaric's throat felt tight, though he didn't know why. He simply watched, his heart slowing with each breath, until the light faded back into the apple and the orchard was still again. The caretaker rose slowly to his feet. "It's time you rested too," he said kindly. "The castle will keep you safe. The moon watches, even in sleep." Alaric nodded, setting the apple back on the ground. "Will I dream her dream too?" The caretaker smiled. "If you listen closely enough." Then he turned and began to walk toward the edge of the orchard, his form fading gently into the silver mist until he was gone. Alaric stood for a moment longer beneath the branches, feeling the calm settle deeper into his bones. Then he made his way back toward the castle, the soft earth cool beneath his boots. When he reached his chamber, he paused by the window. The moon had almost disappeared now, its light no more than a whisper over the horizon. He lay down on his bed, the sheets cool and welcoming, and closed his eyes. The air was filled with the faint scent of apples and candle wax. As he drifted towards sleep, he thought he heard a quiet voice, neither the castle's nor the caretaker's, but something softer still. Rest now, child of the living. When the moon wakes, she will remember you. His breathing slowed, his body loosened, and outside, for the first time in 1,000 years, the moon finally slept. The night holds its breath, the castle serene beneath the slumbering moon. Very softly now, the night exhales. The castle breathes in silence, and somewhere beyond the dark horizon, the first threads of morning begin to stir. Let us drift into the final piece, the closing dream of this long, sleepy Halloween. Chapter 10: Dawn over the Haunted Castle. When Alaric opened his eyes again, the world was drenched in a pale, golden haze. The air inside his chamber was cool, still touched by the breath of night. But a faint warmth had begun to spread along the floor where sunlight crept through the tall window. He lay for a long moment without moving, just watching how the light shifted gently over the walls, how it caught in the dust motes floating like tiny ghosts suspended in honey. There was no rush, no sound, only the rhythm of his breathing, and the soft, patient hum of a castle waking from its own long dream. Somewhere, faintly, a bell tolled once. Not loud, just a single, low note of acknowledgement. The kind of sound that doesn't disturb but completes the silence. He rose slowly, wrapping his cloak around his shoulders, and crossed the room to the window. Outside, the mist that had blanketed the courtyard all night was thinning. It drifted lazily upward, revealing cobbled paths glistening with dew and flower beds glittering faintly with frost. The fountain had begun to murmur again, its gentle trickle like a whisper returning after a long pause. The moon was gone now, her silver replaced by soft amber light. Alaric smiled. "She's awake again," he whispered, as he descended the grand staircase. His footsteps made the faintest echo, like a memory repeating itself. The castle seemed to hum softly around him, the walls warm, the air filled with a kind of invisible music. Not the echo of ghosts, but the quiet pulse of contentment. He made his way toward the great hall, where a few tall candles still flickered in their holders, their flames golden instead of white now. The long table, empty the night before, was laid with a simple meal: bread, apples, and a jug of warm milk. He smiled faintly at the sight. A farewell then. As he sat, the chair beneath him felt almost alive, as though remembering the hundreds who had sat there before him, all welcomed in the same gentle way. He tore a piece of bread, dipped it in the milk, and ate slowly. The flavor was soft, comforting, real. The apples gleamed in the morning light, and for a moment, he thought he saw one of them pulse faintly, a last heartbeat of moonlight before fading into the day. When he finished, he stood and turned toward the great doors. They were already open, as if the castle had known he would leave now. The air that flowed through them was cool and bright, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant chimneys. He walked slowly out into the courtyard. The statues, their knights, queens and angels seemed gentler by daylight. Their stone faces were calm, their eyes turned toward the soft horizon. Birds were beginning to wake in the trees, their calls delicate and hesitant. As though unsure if morning was truly here yet, Alaric paused beside the old well once more. The water inside reflected only the sky now, pale, blue and wide, no trace of the moon's reflection remaining. But when he leaned closer, he thought he saw the faintest ripple, as if something below still breathed. He whispered, "Rest well, my friend," and the ripple stilled. From behind him came a slow, steady tapping of boots against stone. He turned to find the caretaker standing near the archway, lantern in hand, though unlit now. The old man's expression was serene. "You slept through the castle's last whisper," he said gently. "Few ever hear it." Alaric smiled. "I think I felt it in my dreams." "Then it was given," said the caretaker. "That's all she asks, that we remember stillness and carry it back into the waking world." He stepped forward, holding out his hand. Alaric clasped it. The man's palm was warm, steady, grounding. "You will go now," said the caretaker softly, "but she will remember you, as she remembers all who walk gently here. And when autumn returns, and the candles burn low again, the castle will whisper your name among her dreams." Alaric felt a calm ache rise in his chest. Not sorrow, not longing, but the bittersweet tenderness that always comes when leaving something sacred. He bowed slightly. "Then I will listen, wherever I am." The caretaker nodded. "That is enough." They stood in silence for a long moment. The wind began to move through the courtyard again, carrying with it the scent of ivy, wood smoke, and faint apples. Somewhere high above, a bellbird called, its song clear and delicate, the very first sound of true morning. Alaric turned toward the gates. The path beyond was lined with poplars that glowed gold in the new sunlight. He began to walk slowly, each step light, sure, unhurried. The air felt new behind him. The castle gleamed faintly, its windows winking in the light as though smiling. The towers rose calm and proud, their stones catching every shimmer of dawn. The soft mist around the highest spire curled upward one last time, then broke apart, drifting into the sky. As he reached the hill beyond the gate, he turned for one final look. The castle stood in perfect stillness, bathed in sunlight. No shadow, no chill, no ghost, only grace for a heartbeat. He thought he saw figures in the windows, the portraits perhaps, the memories of all who had whispered before him, standing together in soft golden light. And in that moment, the castle seemed to breathe just once, like a living being sighing with peace. He whispered to the wind, "Thank you for the rest." Then he turned and continued down the path. The birds sang louder now. The day unfolded slowly. The world, in its gentle way, began again. And somewhere behind him, beneath the light of dawn, the haunted castle slept once more. Not in darkness, not in silence, but in the soft eternity of peace.